I was always told that you could only do one. You had to sacrifice gross to get volume, or you had to sacrifice volume to get gross. And after working with you, I found out that that's not the truth, right? You can do both. And there's proof right there in our dealers that are working it.
Hey, this is Jason Rice. We're going to do a continuation of our Up Bus podcast. And what we're doing is every week we are going to do interviews. And as you can see, I already have John Anderson here. He's joining us. He's our VP. And I wanted his insight. We do a weekly newsletter that includes what we call a view from the top. And our team brings in some of the insights they're seeing as they're dealing with dealerships every week and going through inventory, price changes, lead management, and we get this highlighted view of things that we're noticing. And John brought to me a week or two ago some of the stats he's looking at on lead management when it comes to inventory, because it's a direct reflection of performance of that dealership. So with that, I want to introduce John, but I also have him give a quick little background of his resume there real quick. And then, John, just kind of lead into, these stats and these numbers that we're going to be talking about. So, John, thanks for joining us. What do you got?
Thanks, Jason. No, it's great to have this opportunity. Actually spent 35 years roughly on the dealership side in all phases. Found my love for the car business when I was cleaning cars for a detail shop with my best friend. His dad was a general manager of a Chevrolet store in Indiana. And after I got out of college, I gravitated back towards the dealership side and actually met you as a GM / used car manager of a CDJR store for a 9-store group that I was working for. And I did not have a used car manager. So I reached out to you after I saw one of your podcasts or your Dealer On webinars is what it was with Ileana, and said, man, this guy is hitting right where I live at. And we had a discussion and ended up hiring you and your data as my used car assistant, which worked out really well. So I can remember our meetings every Wednesday from 10 to 11. Just out of that, and then having been with Lotpop for, my goodness, I think this July will be 8 years. Time flies, right?
Yeah.
But having been with Lotpop for all that time, and watching what we watch, and obviously as things have evolved, and now we have the software, and then we brought in the lead management side of things, it just opened up a whole new level of understanding when it comes to as you see inventory sitting and not selling and bleeding through dealers' aging buckets, and trying to help dealers understand and bring solutions. So when we started looking at this, something started becoming evident when we started looking at the lead age buckets. So 0 to 14 day, and then 15 to 30, 31 to 45, and 46 to 60. When you started breaking that down, the percentages that I started seeing were that the 0 to 14 day, or the fresh leads, were getting worked, relatively well. I think I told you, Jason, I was seeing that roughly 30 to 40% of those leads on average were not getting a contact in 2 days or longer. But then when you jumped into that 15 to 30 and 31 to 45 and 46 to 60, the numbers spiked extremely high. They almost doubled. So, when you go to 31 to 45, those numbers jumped up into the 60 to 70% range. The 46 to 60 were jumping up into that 100%, 90 to 100%. So when you start to see that middle bucket build up and that bleed through and aging, and then you're looking at it on the vehicles in stock that we actually have a lead on that we can sell today, it just was becoming evident as I looked at more and more dealers that we're kind of dropping the contact on talking to our customers at day 15. And it makes sense when you start connecting the dots where you start to see that middle bucket inventory and the aging growing, because we're just not talking to our customers.
Yeah. And so when you brought that up to me, I'm like, you've seen this at a lot. You're like, well, I haven't put any, I've seen it at enough, but I haven't looked at it, on a big scale. So I went ahead and start digging through our tool. Now, this is something that we're going to hopefully have automatically in our tool here soon, and trending these metrics out. But I started digging through. What I did was I looked at 10 dealerships that wasn't using our tool. And then I went to the 10 dealerships that was using our tool for their process management. At least they're actively working leads in our tool, as far as, checking the box and moving on. And just for people to know, we combine inventory data from, vAuto, VinQ, Max Digital, Dealers Link, wherever. And then we combine that data and look at insights on what's slowing the dealership's inventory down. Then we pull data from lead management or CRMs, and we combine that information together. And, I start, and so we don't replace the CRM, but we do give them a different process to work leads. So our concept is, and again, I started selling internet leads in 1998, and we've done it the same way for 20 plus years. I guess it's 27 years now. Is you typically manage leads based on the age of the lead, which now looking back is you realize that's irrelevant to where the customer is in buying cycle. I always say we don't know if they're 2 days out or 2 months out. We honestly can say that. So why do we manage leads based on the age of the lead if we don't know when they're ready to pull the trigger? I much prefer, as like you said, we put these two worlds together. I'd much rather manage leads based on the situation on my lot than the age of the lead. So if I got a large pickup truck problem, they're not selling, I want to work my truck leads. And if I happen to have truck leads and the truck's still in stock, let's increase the contact ratio every day, every other day, to get my sale rate back up, regardless if it's a 50-day lead or a 2-day lead. So just kind of give you some insight what John's talking about. What we look at is, let's take all their active leads where the car's still in stock. And by the way, that's typically only about anywhere from 20 to 40% of your 60 days of leads. Only about 20 to 40% can still buy the car they're interested in. So let's take that chunk of leads and start increasing contact ratio. The biggest opportunity to schedule appointments to sell a car is an active lead where their car's still in stock, right? We offer switch leads for the other, but we won't talk about that right now. And so we're seeing 500 leads total, but only about 120 where the car's still in stock.
Right.
And so we're pointing out, do you want to have your team weed through 500 leads every day? Hey, do a 3-day call, 7-day email, 10-day phone call, 14-day email. And clear all these tasks out of the CRM based on the age of the lead, or weed through 500 leads? Or would you rather just focus on 120 leads where the car's still in stock and just increase contact ratio there? And so that's kind of what John's talking about, and that's the numbers we're going to expose here. John, I'll pull up these numbers. Is there anything you want to add before we do?
I think, just to reemphasize what you said, I think the more we get into this, I think it's really evident that though what we're seeing a lot of times is still that siloed operation within the dealership. And I really think that's something that dealers really need to take a look at within their own dealership. Is, we have our sales managers over here working, appraising cars, working deals, submitting deals, all the stuff that they do on a normal basis. We have our team over here talking to our customers, right? And just think about it. Jason, you and I talk a lot about, what we would do on our bricks and mortar lot, we should be doing on our online dealership, right? And just think about that from a perspective of when a customer walks in the front door, right? Typically, management is alerted. They're aware of what's going on. They typically introduce themselves to the customer. They're involved early in the deal, and I just see a lot of that siloed. So to your point, trying to get dealers to understand that, to become more focused on what can actually sell us a vehicle today, right?
Yeah.
And I don't hear me out. I know my age. I mentioned this earlier today about working in the CRM, and somebody made the comment that they had CRMs when you were selling cars. And then, funny, but I did work in a CRM, and I do remember as a salesperson, right? Maybe I hadn't sold a car in 2 or 3 days, and now I've got this task list that I'm going through, and 80% of the tasks that I'm looking at have nothing. There's nothing that I can do to sell a car that day. And that would frustrate me as a salesperson because I need to sell a car. That's how I make a living. So I think more to your point, and I just wanted to emphasize that it's really important for dealers to understand where my biggest opportunities are. And you kind of see in these numbers we're about to show that the ball's just getting dropped at day 15. So,
yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I think so. This, if you notice, this was April 25th. So I would say that's still a little bit of a hangover of I mean, again, we're looking at 60 days of leads, right? So April 25th would bring it back to, February leads, February and March, so that's tax season leftover stuff. And I want to bring that up. So these top numbers, okay, and again, you got to remember, for people who's watching this, these are active leads where the car's still in stock. The first set of numbers are our current clients that are not completing lead management through our tool. They're still using their CRM to dictate how they're communicating with their dealers or with their consumers. And so there was a total of 643 leads. Of those, 212 was still in stock. So that means 67% of their active leads were on cars no longer in stock. That goes to 33% can still buy the car they're interested in. Now with that, dealers had 118 cars in stock. 53 of those cars had no leads. So 45% of their inventory had no leads at all. Okay. So what we start looking at, the 0 to 14 day information over here is these are active leads, cars still in stock. The lead is 0 to 14 days old. And how many of those leads have not been contacted in at least a 2-day window? And that was at 35%, to your point. That means what, 65% of these fresh leads have been contacted in the last couple of days. And I guarantee if I would have looked at 0 to 7 day leads and then 8 to 14 days, I get the 0 to 7 is going to be in the teens probably. Those are worked the most because they're fresh leads. 15 to 30, 63%. 31 to 45, by the time the lead's 30 days and older, you're talking 79 to 85% of those leads haven't been contacted in at least 2 days. To your point, they're giving up on them. With that, those dealers sell 49% in the last 2 weeks. So that means they're selling 98% of their inventory in a 4-week window. And then we want to increase gross profit. The best way you do that is increase the amount of cars you sell fresh, and 59% of their cars are being sold fresh. So that's the numbers here. And so those are the dealers not using our tool. And then I try to take comparable dealers that are using our tool. And what I mean by comparable, just so happen on average, they also had 118 cars in stock. And just so happened 52 of those didn't have any leads. So if you notice, the numbers are comparable. 45% of their inventory with no leads, comparable lots. You take a look at the leads, again, comparable. When you look at the percentage of active leads on sold cars, 67%. Okay, no fluke there. There's just, again, I randomly picked these dealers, but they're pretty consistent. Okay. But the other difference is, though, if you look at contact ratio, fresh leads, 21% instead of 35%, 37, 43. I mean, look at 31 to 45 up here, almost 80%, and then 85%. Down here, it's cut in half. Okay. Only 34% or older leads haven't been contacted in 2 days. These dealers are 65% of those leads that are older than 45 days are actually being worked. They're engaging with these consumers twice as much as the dealers not using the tool. And with that, they're selling 2% more, 51% versus the 49%. But remember, that's only a 2-week period. So 2% more. That means they're selling 4% more of their current inventory. This dealer's going to sell 98. This one will sell 102. And then they're selling 4% more fresh. So they're going to get more gross. Now, before I turn this back over to you, John, this is one set in April. I'm going to show you another set of data, same dealers, but a week or two later on May 2nd. But John, anything you want to add to this?
One thing I would, and you mentioned it, in the top set of dealers not working, right? And where it's it dropped, it definitely drops off at day 15, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you shared when you compiled this data and you shared it with me, I started going back. So this was a couple of weeks ago when you shared this first one with me, and I started going back in and looking at the our dealers, and there's a sort that I do in our data where I look at out of stock leads that have an out of stock inventory that have an active lead on it, but as of that day, we don't have a switch. They don't have a switch vehicle that we can move that, which we show switches to our customers, obviously, our dealers. They don't. The dealer doesn't have a switch vehicle to put that customer in. And I sort those leads by most recent contact, ascending contact. And in almost every situation, and again, I haven't looked at all our dealers, but I looked at several, you see it's evident that the process, that those dealers are still working by the age of the lead in the CRM, because you see a lot of recent contacts on those out of stock vehicles with active leads on them. You see them contact them. We really don't have anything to talk to them about. We don't have a vehicle to sell them. And then when I switch back over, and the numbers you see right there, when you look at their in stock active leads, they're not contacting them. So I think it's more of the understanding of, and I get it. I think I get it, that's a hard look. That's something we've been doing in our industry for years, right? Is setting up processes in our CRMs to by the age of the lead. As the lead ages, we set up a different process. And I think being able to understand that there's a better strategy to get production and get sales and lift immediately by talking to your in-stock customers. I think that's I see that to be a hard process to abandon. And I think that's where a lot of this separation comes in at. The dealers that get it, they seem to attach to it pretty quick, and you start to see that separation that you're seeing here. And
and that's where so what you're saying is, you got an active lead, let's say it's 30 days old. The car they want, it's no longer in stock. You have no other switch alternative, no similar vehicles, but yet your team called them yesterday. Well, why? Because they completed a 30-day phone call, and that's all they did. And again, no rhyme or reason. What are you going to say to that customer if they picked up the phone? You don't have the car they want anymore. You have nothing in the price point or segment that matches it, but yet all you did was complete a task. You did a 30-day call. In the meantime, you got a 28-day-old lead. You haven't called in over 2 weeks, and the car's still in stock. Well, why haven't you called them in 2 weeks? Well, because it's 28-day-old lead. So because after 2 weeks, you spread it out to once a week or every other week, right? And so if I'm going to spend, what we found is it's like 80% of the activity they're doing, the calls, if they did 100 calls and emails today, 80 of them have no rhyme or reason to your current inventory and getting your inventory moving. And that's just a shame. 80% of what they do should help you sell a car today. But again, CRMs don't talk cars. They don't know. You can't isolate truck leads and say, hey, my trucks are suffering. Let me get my truck leads and start calling them. You can't even do that in CRMs. And so this is the world we're connecting. We're seeing these numbers. It just don't make sense. And I brought up this chart, like I said, when I first mentioned it, is saying, hey, there's a lot of tax season activity going on here. So when you go look at the next following week, and it's the same set of dealers, okay, let's talk about the inventory. These dealers up here not using the tool, 125 cars, 117 cars. If we looked at how many cars with no leads, again, 50%, almost verbatim, half those cars don't have leads. And then we looked at the lead count. And again, almost verbatim, 67 and 69% of those leads can now no longer buy the car they're interested in. And then we started breaking down the numbers again. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it was fluke. Maybe these dealers got behind. No, not the same thing. 32%, 62%, 82%, 72%. After 15 days, they're really not spending any time with these leads. And again, they're selling 49% with 62% fresh. Okay, so 49% in 2 weeks, 62% fresh. The dealers actually using the tool, contacting the leads at twice the rate and saying, hey, I got a truck problem, let's call truck leads. The guys that are actually using the tool, these numbers can be better. And again, this is just all new to us, and we're trying to get more and more usage out of our tools, and then more and more of them changing the way they've done the process over 20 years, right? Say, hey, don't do that anymore, do it this way. But if you can tell, these dealers are contacting their dealers at a better rate. Notice the big jump now. Now the tax season's starting to fade away. These dealers are selling 55% in 2 weeks. they're going to sell 110 cars while this dealer's selling 98. Okay. That right there, doing 6% more in a 2-week window. That's a 12% more in a month window. And again, 3% more out in the first 30 days. They're doing it with gross. And I think the further and further we get away from tax season, the bigger and bigger this gap's going to be of the dealers that are more efficient. Okay. And John, anything again to add once we kind of saw these numbers? Any different?
Yes. And it seems so simple, but the thing that jumps off the page at me in both weeks that you took a snapshot, other than obviously you're starting to see it spread out, which you and I both felt like if you trended this over time, you'd start to see a bigger separation, is that the dealers that are working their leads are hitting our 2 core pillars, right? That we try to work with all of our dealers to hit, right? Selling what we're stocking at a minimum and selling 65% or higher out of their 0 to 30 day where most of their gross is sitting, right? So these dealers are getting both volume and gross. Now, the percentages are close, so I could see where somebody go and look at it. Well, John, it's only, you're talking 62 to 65. But my point is, so far in 2 weeks, these dealers have consistently hit the 2 pillars. The other dealers are not hitting that on average, and we're starting to see it separate. So, I just wanted to bring emphasis to that because that's if you're looking at driving results, and if you want to get both volume and gross, which I'll be honest, when you and I met, Jason, I think I mentioned to you that, I was always told that you could only do one. You had to sacrifice gross to get volume, or you had to sacrifice volume to get gross. And after working with you, I found out that that's not the truth, right? You can do both. And there's proof right there in our dealers that are working it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no argument here on both metrics or both time periods. The dealers that are actually effectively working this process, working leads based on inventory issues, they're selling more and they're making more money. But again, this is still in that everything's going good tax season part. Once things start slowing down, which they have, and you go a month from now where really things start slowing down because we haven't hit that summer uptick yet, that we'll get a little bit of. This gap's going to get bigger and bigger. So, I'll probably give it another week and then I'll run these numbers again and see what we find. But I pretty much guarantee the dealers that are paying attention and being more assertive, actually working leads based on the car still in stock. And again, this, to me, that seems like a no-brainer. Let's just work the leads where the car's still in stock and let's start scheduling appointments there first and then do the rest of our tasks that we're supposed to do. To me, seems like a no-brainer. And again, the numbers are proving it. And as we get farther and farther from a good tax season bull, these dealers are going to start separating. My bet's that the 2 week solds get in the 30s and the first 30 sale rates get in the 40s and 50s for these dealers that aren't using the tool as much. And then these other dealers stay in that 50% 2 week sold rate and, high 50s, low 60 first 30s. But we'll see how this pans out.
I agree. And again, when you talk about what you just mentioned, typically we see an uptick in July and August for the summer selling season. I believe we will again this year because there's a lot of new car inventory on the grounds. Mm-hmm. But over this next 60 days, how important it is for these dealers to keep their inventory clean and fresh. Because listen, if you enter into that July and August and you've got a bunch of aged inventory that you've priced down, guess where your customers are going to come in and feed on is that lower price point inventory. So you're not going to have the ability to maximize your gross. And if I could, Jason, one of the things I really wanted to, I knew we were having this call, obviously, and I really wanted to get across is I understand that, during the COVID years, we had a lot of abnormal things and customers were lining up and buying cars from us, but that's all shifted now. And, I know we mentioned a lot through our team that, we would like to see, 3 to 4 day contact points on customers, with our customers, reaching out to our customers. And if you can think about it for a second, I always show this when I'm talking to our dealer partners, right? My cell phone. And what do people sit on their phones all day and do? I mean, they're either on Facebook or, Instagram or they're looking at TikTok videos, right? They're just consuming content, right? And so, if we believe the numbers that the average customer is reaching out to, 3 to 4 dealers when they start their buying process, right? And so let's consider all those even. And then when we look at these numbers where we're dropping off contacting those leads at day 15, and we don't really know what the customer's buying cycle is, my goodness, how important is it to meet the customers where they're living at, right? Continue to give them content. And so it doesn't always have to be a call about, hey, do you still want to buy that car, right? There's a lot of content that I can deliver to them. Video of maybe they've never been to the dealer store before. I take a video and show them the store so that when they actually physically arrive at the store, they're not tense because everything looks similar to what they saw in a video that the salesperson sent them, right? So there's a lot of different content that I think I'm not sure a lot of salespeople, and I say this because I've talked to a lot of salespeople, and obviously we have a company trainer that works with them as well, and we hear this a lot, is they're not sure if we're asking them to get a hold of them every 3 days, what type of content can I continue to deliver to the customer? So, dealers really think through that, because I think there is a lot of good content that can be brought out there, and you're meeting a customer where they're living at because they're looking at content all day long on these things.
Yeah. And I mean, to wrap this up too, it's, I think, we talked about switch. We can dig that in another episode, but we're talking about active lead, car sold. Okay. Do they really need a 2016 F-150, or are they just looking for a 30 grand pickup truck? And if they're looking for a 30 grand pickup truck, are they open to other things? And so when 60 to 70% of your leads can no longer buy the car they're interested in, they have to buy something else. This isn't a new car factory where they go, well, I'll just order it and wait a couple months. They have to buy a different color, different miles, different price point. And 60 to 70% of the people buy a different vehicle than they first, were required about. So why not be from you? And to your point, the different content, instead of saying, I like saying, hey folks, I got good news and bad news. Bad news is your car you're interested in sold. Good news is I can't sell you. I can't sell you it anymore. I'm not a salesman anymore. I'm trying to help you now. What do you want? What do you need? Let me see what I have, and then offer them alternatives to switch them to something else. And that's just a different approach. Same thing with capturing trade-in information. How many of your active leads have trade-in information? Because then you say, hey, I'm no longer calling you about this car anymore, or I've been trying to call you about this car and I haven't had any luck, but really the reason why I'm reaching out is I'd like to get your trade-in. We need some information. We love, we need more vehicles, and I'd like to get you more information on your trade-in. So there's a ton of different ways to work these leads. As things slow down, as things get tougher, don't just give up on these leads, recycle them and keep using them until they, what I used to say, buy, die, or unsubscribe. I mean, just tell me where you're at. If not, I'm going to continue to try to help you buy a car and try to sell you stuff. But no, that's really good data. I had to bite my tongue for like a week or two because I was sitting on this information. I always like putting tips out, but I wanted to give kudos to you for bringing it to the table. And, it's eye-opening, and more we dig into this, the more and more we're going to actually trend this stuff out and have more exposure to the weakness in the current processes.
No, it's been, listen, it's been great. Our sales director, Chris Keene, and I were on a call and we talked about it, and it was brought up, and that's where we started looking at it. It was like, my goodness. And we were communicating in the back. And that's when I reached out to you and go, man, have you seen this? So it just, I think that's a good thing about what we do, right? We have dealers all over the country and in Canada, and we start to see these trends and we start to bring it up. And then next thing you know, it's very pertinent information that can help dealers out. And I think this is extremely critical right now with market conditions. I think it's on point with what we're seeing, lack of contact and the current market conditions. It's just absolutely necessary that we hang in with our customers longer. Definitely.
Yeah. And that means too, it's all factual. Workthefacts.com if you'd like to get a copy of our book and our metrics, but it's all factual data. You can't argue, right? You got 150 leads, cars still in stock. You haven't called them in 2 days. Why? You can't argue it, and it just doesn't make sense. But it's, again, you can't go into, it's very hard for a lot of these CRMs just to go in and pull those leads up. Give me active leads still in stock that haven't contacted in 2 days, and then start attacking them, especially attacking them if it's a particular issue on your lot. So workthefacts.com if you want a copy of some of these metrics that we do for inventory management. I plan on having a second book out, work these first, but probably stay with the WTF, about what we just talked about, lead management and which leads should be handled first. Yep. Thank you, John, for your time. I hope this was helpful. A little bit longer than we typically put out, but I think a lot of great information. We're going to continue to do this each week with different team members from our team, from our Lotpop company, working with dealers on our Lotwalk tool. If you go to lotwalk.com, check that out. But again, John, thanks for your time. Thanks for these insights, and we'll keep digging through these numbers to, again, get this exposed to dealers. This is factual information that I think makes more sense in the 8 years that I've been in the car business and working leads for that long too. So thanks for your time, and see you next week.